muchachos, amigos, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. Fun time had by all. I'm PD Rave. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my friends. We've got David Majors, aka DJM.
Buenos tacos, muchachos. This week it's Drew's album.
And all the way at the end, we have Drew.
Hey, folks, I'm at the end, and this week it's my album.
Toshiba. All right. Like looking over here. All right. We're here to talk about music. We're here to talk about an album. Before I get distracted again. And it is provided by Drew. Drew, what album do you have, in fact?
Well, this is an album that was suggested I bring on by my lovely fiance. It is a band that was one of those bands, I think they came out just like slightly in the wrong era for the type of sound they went for. But a band I am nonetheless loved. A band that is responsible for me getting COVID. Band from Minneapolis, Minnesota, known as Motion City Soundtrack, went with the album that's, again, probably the lesser known of the two albums that they really came through on, which is 2003's I Am the Movie.
Yeah. David, what were your expectations? What did you anticipate when you heard that we were going to do this album?
Well, when I started looking these guys up, Motion City Soundtrack, I recognized some of the bands that they called influences and were compared to. I believe there was Sunny Day Real Estate was one of them, and a few others that are escaping me off the top of my head. So while I hadn't heard these guys specifically, given that they were on Epitaph Records and they mentioned having influences of some bands of this style, I kind of knew that I would be getting into a pop punk vibe that isn't on the sillier side of pop punk, maybe more on the serious side, but not all the way on the screaming, crying, throw up side. But kind of a more mature pop punk sound.
Yes. Yeah, I was looking forward to it because this is gonna likely get into the emo pop punk alternative side of 2003. And you know, I was looking forward to it. I cannot recall. I do not believe, out of all the bands that I was into at the time, if I ever really got into Motion City Soundtrack, but I'm pretty sure they were around, like a name that was around. Likely because if I were to sum up a good chunk of my music taste, I think from I would say maybe the late 90s, but definitely into the 2000s, I would probably use the three words Tony Hawk soundtrack as my music taste at the time. So both literally and figuratively. And I was anticipating this to kind of like fit into that mental slot of my memories, but I was anticipating, I was looking forward to seeing how it fit and how it differentiated. But let's get into how it is musically. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, the thing with Motion City Soundtrack, like I said, they kind of, I feel like, came around in the wrong era for like what their sound was. And why I say that was that this was 2003 to 2006 when they started to blow up. But at that point, if you think about the pop punk / emo scene of that era, you were getting you were starting to get into the Panic at the Discos, the My Chemical Romances, like that sort of side of things. Like that was starting to bubble up within the scene. So they were coming in the tail end of an era that was dominated by like Saves the Day, Get Up Kids, to a lesser extent Straight Light Run, Further Seems Forever, those types of bands. And what I love about Motion City Soundtrack is, like you guys said, they were on Epitaph. So if you remember Epitaph in that era, like PD kind of alluded to, it was very Tony Hawk. If you remember the Tony Hawk Pro Skater soundtrack, half of that soundtrack were probably signed or came through Epitaph at some point. So you were getting a lot of that like more manic, high speed pop punk energy, instead of the mid tempo stuff that would dominate from like 2005 to 2010. And you got that, right? There was it definitely fit more into that mold. Plus one, they had a Moog on stage, or Moog or Moog. I'm never quite 100% sure.
It's Moog. Thank you.
It's Moog. But they had one like the Get Up Kids. So like when I got into them, the thing was like, oh, they're using a synth like the Get Up Kids did. I love the Get Up Kids. I want to listen to more of this because this is awesome. I love the synth and piano in my emo. I'm a sucker. Also, the thing to me as well is Justin Pierre's vocal is very interesting. It is not overly pretty. I feel like with this type of sound, with like that punk rock, pop punk sort of sound, there needs to be a little bit of edge and a little bit of like, rawness is the wrong term, but like that little bit of rasp, that little bit of rawness, that like you can't be too pretty or else something doesn't click in my head. Whereas this has just enough pretty and just enough motion and just enough control, but there's still that like outer edge rasp. And it's mixing that all into that late 90s, early 2000s pop punk feel while still being like very, very, very rooted in like that late 90s emo scene and like wearing your heart on your sleeve. Like a lot of these songs are about anxiety and worrying and imposter syndrome and depression and stuff like that, while not being morose, if that makes sense.
David, how would you describe this album musically?
Thematically, I think Drew hit it well in that there is a sense of melancholy, but it is not unrelentingly dark and bleak. And I think that, like a lot of bands from this particular time period in the early 2000s, I think they had the benefit of really good production and really good sound. Because that was the one thing that I've seen on this album and a lot of albums from this time period, is that bands like this had really good production. The bass was solid, the guitar was solid, the drums were great, the snare drum really pops, and you hear that throughout all of this. And there is a simplicity to it, and the moments of synth that come in are a really nice little surprise. They don't go overboard, because that would be really out of place on an album like this. But when the synth does show up, it's really exciting.
Yeah, it is kind of like a holdover of sounds that were big a couple of years before, and it's done really well, produced really well. Like as we said, the guitars are really well performed, and the synth, the Moog, comes in at just the right moments and has like just the right like additions. It also gave me I wrote down my favorite note is I wrote Moog music. Um, so
Okay,
yeah,
I'm checking
I'm
out
just proud of that note. Yeah, just proud of that note.
Moog TM.
Yeah, and it's I mean, just even reading like the history of the album, which was the fact that they would burn out CDRs and like cut open big old floppy disks and put them in there to sell them out that way. Um, it is a really great kind of sound that I remember enjoying back then. This was I don't want to say like this was my emo
Yup.
for sure. Like I I I think I don't, especially not now. I don't necessarily dislike or feel any negative feelings towards like the mid 2000s emo that kind of like went a little bit more mainstream. I think at the time, when I was like in my 20s, I probably was like,
God, Petey. Yes, you're
but
saying exactly my thoughts. Sorry.
but
Like even in the early 2000s, even when I was like diving deep into the prog world, I would hear stuff like this around 2001, 2002, and I'd be saying, "No, this isn't bad. This isn't bad." But yeah, by about 2005 or so,
yeah, I think it was just a different. It went to a different style and different sound, and the reality of it is, like I said, I was by the time that era of emo, I was an adult, and I mean, adult. I don't think I'm adult. I'm an adult now, but
None of us feel like adults. It's the curse of the millennial.
I was in that age where I was.
that's Thursdays,
telling
guys.
myself I'm
We
an
save
adult
that stuff
now.
for Thursdays.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
But it's worth noting. It was an era of time where I was definitely trying to tell myself I was an adult. Like we all kind of like have that era, especially in our 20s, where we're trying to tell ourselves we're an adult now. We're grown. We're big boys now. We wear big pants and we listen to big
Hold
boy
on.
things.
I wore big pants.
Thursdays, gentlemen. Thursdays.
Because I wore Jinkos.
But we wear big boy pants now. And it was a sound and a style and a look that definitely resonated with a different set of teenagers. Everybody was looking like the original Ian and Anthony of Smosh. Like they were going through that era or had like their eyeliner, and that was great. But this was a sound of like my the era of emo that I was enjoying at the time, which was more like Taking Back Sunday, Straight Light Run a little bit, by Connection, Saves the Day, all the bands that most of the bands that Drew mentioned, and this was a nice like addition to that, like in that little Rolodex of bands that I'm may or may not have been into at the time. My memory sucks, but I'm glad to have them now. And it's the production is fantastic, and it works really well into like that style of emo. Let's get into the key tracks. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks that you would zero in on that make this album what it is?
Well, Cambridge, to me, you mentioned Tony Hawk. If Cambridge shouldn't have been in an extreme sports video game, I don't know what track on this song deserves it more. It gets right into it. There is, for my money, some of the tightest like snare flams and rolls in this era of punk.
You also say flams and rolls in your notes.
I mean, the best musician in the Mulligans was the drummer. If I didn't mention that, I would have been shot. The synth hits really early in the song and sort of lets you know it's there very clearly, very early on, which I like. The Future Freaks Me Out was the single, and that started to get them some buzz. It did not hit as heavy at the time as LGFUAD did, otherwise known as Let's Get Fucked Up and Die. Figuratively, of course.
In-game.
There's a that is a joke specifically for fans already. But it's catchy, it's fun, it's a single for a reason. Like, it was the one they tried to push out there for a reason. The Moog sounds were great. The play in the vocals with the drop in and outs were great. My favorite accident, specifically on this, is there is something about this song and the way it's constructed and the way it sounds. The way that in the verses there is a very strong underpinning melody and movement within the guitar, but it's very low in the mix with the like vocals like sitting way on top of it. And then going in and building into these bombastic choruses, which feels very like early 90s emo in a way, like that grunge era almost, because that was a lot of what like Nirvana and Pearl Jam were doing, was riding that roller coaster, but doing it in like a pop punk milieu. That to me is like my late teens, early 20s, like those summer nights, like that era for me was punctuated by MXPX did it, Motion City Soundtrack did it, Saves the Day did it, Get Up Kids did it, like a ton of these bands did it in like at least a song, if not a couple. And I don't know why, like there's so much nostalgia in that for me. And then I'll close out with A-OK. Ending the album on one of the best uses of layered vocals on the album, I think was a really, really cool choice for me.
David, what would be some of the key tracks for you that make this album what it is?
Okay, I will start with track 2, Shiver. The drummer was going especially hard on this. Fills, flams, the whole kit and caboodle. He was really going for it on this track, and that was really enjoyable to listen to. The Future Freaks Me Out. Has a very catchy vocal melody, and I love a good vocal melody in a rock song, especially when the singer is actually singing and not screaming or whining. I really love it. And the fuck it on the verse was really nice too, into the chorus. The unexpected outro from the keyboard lead in Boombox Generation, track 7. That was, oh, that's there. Okay, cool. All right. You can do a little more of that. I won't mind. And I just want to point out again that the mix and the sound on this entire album, every track is really spectacular. Everything is really, really easy to hear.
Yeah. As you guys have pointed out, I'm going to point out a couple of those tracks that kind of like stood out to me. I really liked how the synths were done in like Boombox Generation and Don't Call It a Comeback. Boombox Generation was a nice like a very like poetic Down with MTV track, but that worked really well, and it had some really great moments, and Don't Call It a Comeback really well. Modern Chemistry is a song that I think like resonates almost a little too well.
I actually did put my notes into this one. I said modern chemistry is what happens when the meds and therapy don't quite work as well as they should.
Yeah, exactly. And it works well in that regard. I really liked how that worked, and and Capital H. I think probably is my favorite like Moog integration on the whole album. How it like punctuates the central like riff and hook throughout like the song is a really fun like flourish and really fun integration that I think was a really fantastic way to kind of like use the Moog, and I think that was the one that most stuck out to me as like one of my favorites as far as like how it was used in the song. Yeah, let's bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. David, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
First of all, I hope that the mixer and producer and engineer of this album got work after this and continue to get work after this, because they really earned their paycheck. That is one thing about this genre and this particular era that I will always put over. Maybe it's because of the resources they had with Epitaph Records, or just the right people at the right time, but so many of these bands really knew how to mix and record an album really well. The bass is clear, the drums are great, the guitars are great, and it's not all like swallowing each other, and the vocals are right where they need to be. It's just extremely well done. And there is something to be said about being able to write an album of concise songs. And I really respect that. This was 14 tracks, and it got done in 43 minutes. So it didn't stay too long. And it also wasn't too short, like a lot of modern work is. It can be way too short. I would say by the end, with the last track, A-OK, I was pretty well done, because it was 14 tracks that just kind of went in the same pace. And by the end, it was just kind of a steady pace from start to finish, and I was pretty well satisfied. And while I did listen to this a couple of times, I definitely needed like a break from it. Like I would listen to something else and then I would come back to it. It's not a dynamic album, but it doesn't have to be for the time and what they were doing and what they were playing. I think the only thing I would say is if the Moog was used a little more here and there, I think this would really put this over the top.
Yeah, this is a really nice like revisit of a sound that you know I remember fondly. It is a really nice like debut album. It is well crafted, well made. The energy is fun. The Moog is integrated well. It made me realize how much more I need to like like go back and follow through on like the rest of not just Motion City Soundtrack but other bands is like career and stuff and things, and to like actually follow up how they grew. But this is a nice like going back to like the back in the day, you know, back in the day of like God, over 20 years ago at this point. Is a nice classic. This is nice to listen to some classic rock is what I'm trying to say. And
Oh God.
I just wanted to like trigger some people out there. It's like, yes, this is classic rock. Listen to that.
Now you're gonna wake up at 3 a.m. realizing that you were listening to classic rock.
Hell yeah, I was.
But was it classic rock that really rocked?
Yes.
I'm on a rock.
The music that I listened to back then is good enough to be classic, and I accept that it's old enough. Like I said, that one time I got pissed off at hearing a song on classic rock station was when it was Trapped's Headstrong. and I was like, I do not object to this being considered old enough to be classic rock. I object to this being considered good enough to be classic rock. Like, no.
Unacceptable.
Audio Slave, hell yeah. Like, you know, things from the mid 2000s, of course. Freaking Evanescence, they're iconic, hell yeah. But no, not fucking Trapped. Fuck that guy.
Bring
Fuck
it
that
around.
band. But yeah, bring it back around. Talk about this classic. It's really nice to just, it too much, as David is have often eloquently said, nostalgia rots your brain. But it's okay to like just enjoy it for a little while, it's like just like ice cream rots your teeth, it's just as long as you enjoy it as a treat
In moderation.
in moderation, it's okay. And then brush your teeth later. Yeah, and it is still nice to like throw back to the sound, and it's a really fun, fantastic record. But yeah, let's finish this off with Drew. Drew, how would you conclude on this album as a whole?
One, I want to make note, looking at Ed Rose's bona fides, he did do all the Reggie and the Full Effect stuff and Puddle of Mud's Stuck. He has production credits on, which is a weird
I
combination
take
of
back
shit.
everything I
roundabouts.
said.
Swings and roundabouts, everyone. Swings and roundabouts.
It's fucking weird, some of the shit he did. He also did probably my like dark horse favorite Get Up Kids record, Eudora. But the point, this is Motion City Soundtrack's sort of debut. Back to the Beat, I think, was more of like an EP, or an LP, EP, EP.
Yeah.
I always get those two mixed up. This was their first real EP, and it was something that was, if you weren't looking for it, the choruses were at times copy pasted because they had budgeted $4,000, it cost them $6,000, and they still weren't done. So it was something
Not
like,
as many laptops back then.
yeah, it they were like shit. So it's something where the fact that this album exists in the state that it does, I think, is sort of commendable in and of its own right. And it was, like I said, just their first real go at it in seeing what they could do. They admitted, they were like, we were kind of shit and we didn't know what we were doing, and we overestimated ourselves being able to get this record done. And I've been on record as having a soft spot for those sorts of things. This is my era. This is, like I said, sort of at the end of the era of my punk, like my favorite era of like punk rock and pop punk. That like mid to late 90s, early 2000s era was, that era, especially of Epitaph, was my favorite. So this was one of those bands that I have a super, super soft spot for, even though they gave me COVID. I hope that Pierre's health issues do not continue. I would like to see them again. I haven't had the chance to. That dude's going to tour until he dies, and I hope that's later and not sooner. And it's an album that if you were into the sounds coming out of the Tony Hawk video games and you haven't heard of these guys yet, I would definitely seek it out and give it a try. My Favorite Accident, The Future Freaks Me Out, and LGFUD, Let's Get Fucked Up and Die, off the next one. If you like pop punk, but also like the writing styles of Ben Folds, if you wanted to see those two things sort of mashed up, I can't suggest this band enough.
Yeah, and those are our thoughts on Motion City Soundtrack's debut album. This is a really nice discussion. We're gonna get into the main event of the evening, the moment you've all been waiting for. The highlight, I gotta get around to, like, I think I'm gonna
The
try
gimmick,
to, like,
Petey. The gimmick.
yes, the gimmick. I gotta get around to doing this and making shorts out of just the haikus, because that'll be fun. I used to do it. I used to just have the haikus as like a separate video. I gotta get back to doing that. We put that on TikTok. See if we can get.
I was gonna say that would
numbers.
be a hit on TikTok.
Yeah, make it shorts and TikTok and reels and whatnot. But
Depending
yeah,
on how
that's a
long we
thought.
have TikTok left for.
Yes, exactly. No, we'll have. That's a whole thing. That's for Thursday.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno. David, what is your haiku?
Well-produced pop punk. Kinda lacking in spice, but solid and concise.
My haiku. Back to emo days with the band I missed back then. Glad to have it now. And last but not least, Drew, what is your haiku?
Again, I keep making this joke, but they gave me COVID. I would still see them again. Great, overlooked.
And I
And
changed
those
my
are-
second line on the fly just a few minutes ago.
Yes. Those are our thoughts on Motion City Soundtracks I Am the Movie. You can find it on our Spotify playlists. We're going to slot this in. We're going to sneak this in real quick. We're going to cut in because I forgot to mention my album. But hey, my album, if we're going to throw back to like 10 years ago, I said, fuck it, let's go throw back to 20 years ago. Fuck it, let's just do MF Doom Food. Let's just do it.
Okay.
All right.
Go
cool.
Doom, all caps when you spell the man name. All right, back to the outro. Take it away, PD from
Squiggles.
10 minutes ago. Play Record Breakers, a home game. Do your due diligence, and your due diligence. We've got 2 playlists, one with the episodes slotted in, one without. I'm also working on the YouTube version of the playlist, where we're gonna have all everything on available through YouTube Music and the episodes slotted in appropriately. At that point with YouTube, luckily I'm not limited by Squarespace's RSS feed limitation on episodes, which is a weird thing. So it's basically all the way back to episode 21, DJ M's first appearance on Record Breakers, when we talked about Dream Theater's Metropolis Part 2, all the way back then, like 9 or 10 years ago.
I'm feeling like I'm going out of my head.
Hell yeah. You probably sang that back then too.
I did.
Yeah.
Bringing it all together. Long-term
Exactly.
booking.
But yeah, all the way back then to all the way now. It's a long process. I have to like literally go into YouTube Music and put add to playlist and then add an episode, add to play. But look forward to that. I'll have that up on YouTube as well. Everything's gonna be on the show notes at recordbreakers.fun. You can find us everywhere you find podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on other places. You can just find the RSS feed on our website, rebelli.net. Find us on YouTube, Rebelli TV, Twitch, Rebelli TV to watch us live, watch us do the podcast live, and also do our show Through the Tomes, where our Real Play D&D show, and of course our bitter millennial / wrestling podcast that masquerades as a playthrough of modded WWE 2K23 GM mode. Fanny Pack Wrestling's my GM 2K23, something like that. Check that out as well. I'll watch it live and do and hang out with us. Yeah, thank you for hanging out with us. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Oodle toot.
Toodle.
Fighting.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.